Good morning, everyone. Today we are examining Jeremiah chapters 21 and 22. Now, there's a lot more that we could say about these chapters than what we're going to be able to this morning. So, allow me to just give a bit of an overview of some of the things that are found in this chapter. In chapter 21, one of the most interesting statements that I find is in verses 4 and 5. Where there the Lord says, Behold, I will turn back the weapons of war that are in your hands, and with which you fight against the king of Babylon, and the Chaldeans who besiege you outside the walls. And I will assemble them in the midst of this city. I myself will fight against you with an outstretched hand, and with a great arm, or with a strong arm, even in anger and fury and great wrath. I want you to consider for a moment the fact that God says he is going to directly fight against his people. Now, to some people, that's going to be an unbearable statement, that God would actually fight against his people. But one of the things that you have to remember in analyzing this particular statement is his people have left him. It is not a matter that God is abandoning them. They have switched sides. They have switched sides by their actions. They have switched sides by their rebellion. They have switched sides by their gods that they choose to worship. And so it's not a situation where they are looking to God for help and God is just going to ignore them. But rather it is the case that God has asked them to return to his side, to become his people again, over and over again. And they have instead chosen to remain with the enemy. How did James put it? Do you not know that friendship with the world makes you enmity with God, or makes you the enemy of God? That's exactly where Judah finds themselves at this point. And God says, I will be working against you, not because I'm leaving you, but because you have left me. When you come down to verse number 9, he's going to talk about the remedy for those that want to save themselves from this desolation. He says, He who remains in this city shall die by the sword, by famine, and by pestilence. But he who goes out and defects to the Chaldeans who besiege you, he shall live, and his life shall be as a prize to him. If you don't want to suffer with your people, if you don't want to face death and degradation in many different ways, you have one option, God says. You have to switch sides. You have to defect. You have to give yourself up to the Chaldeans and surrender. That's the only thing that's going to keep you from this particular fate. When you look at what the people of Judah are hopeful for at this time, they are hopeful for some form of deliverance, some form of redemption, for God to do what God always does. And God says, no. I am not going to follow that same pattern because you have not followed the pattern to get the results. You have not been obedient, you have not been repentant, and you don't really care now except for the fact that you're in distress. And so, God says, the only way you are going to survive this is by changing sides, by defecting. So God basically says there is no hope for the people of Judah at this time. He is not going to help them. They have ignored his commands for too long. The pleas have gone out over decades now for them to stop what they're doing and to turn back, and they will not do it. God says, all right, this is going to happen. Now, when you come to chapter 22, you're going to have a number of messages that are going to be sent to the sons of Josiah. And the sons of Josiah are the ones that are going to reign as kings over the course of the next number of years. And you have a situation where it's not just one son, because the kingship is actually going to kind of hopscotch back and forth from one generation to the next within the family. And so instead of it going from father to son, it will go from father to son to uncle to nephew. And so you've got a series of back and forths of the kingdom over the course of a short period of time. And so in chapter 22, when you get down to verse number 13, there Jeremiah says, "Woe to him who builds his house by unrighteousness, and his chambers by injustice, who uses his neighbor's service without wages, and gives him nothing for his work, who says, I will build myself a wide house with spacious chambers, and cut out windows for it, panel it with cedar, and painting it with vermilion." And then he says in verse 15, "Shall you reign because you enclose yourself in cedar? Did not your father eat and drink and do justice and righteousness? Then it was well with him." God here is condemning those who are going to act purely because they can. They are going to do what they want to do. They are going to give themselves great comfort, all of the luxuries that money can buy, all of the things that they want, and they don't really care about who they walk over. They don't care about who they hurt along the way. God says your fathers, or your father, speaking of Josiah, he ate and drank. He was wealthy, and he was one who had great possessions, and he had been blessed greatly by God, but he also did justice and righteousness. See, they want the ability to eat and drink without having to do justice and righteousness. And God says that won't work. When we try to have it all without the service of God, we will fail. And we will fall short, because ultimately we won't have what really matters, and that's salvation. So these are some of the things that I have pulled out of chapters 21 and 22. Obviously, I haven't touched on anywhere close to every verse, and there's a lot that could be said that I haven't been able to say this morning, but I hope that you've taken the time to examine it, and that you've found some things of your own that are beneficial to you from this chapter. Next time, Lord willing, we will come back and examine chapter 23. But until then, I hope you have a great day.